Hello and welcome. We are about to start the webinar. About 30 seconds. Lost in translations, hope that you don't mind. Strangers in my style. We are the people fighting for you, fighting for you. We are the people fighting for you, fighting for you. All right, welcome to this community panel and wrap-up review of Microsoft Ignite 2018. We're here. We're with the six of us. My name is Maarten Visser. I work for Metro, and today we're hosting this webinar. And I would like to take the moment for each panelist to introduce themselves. Joel, you're up first.
Hey, thanks a lot, Martin. I'm Joel Oleson. I'm a senior IT manager at Blizzard Entertainment and a Microsoft regional director, which, so for those of you who don't know what that means, it's kind of like the MVP that I think a lot more people know, but it's also more executive and broader, I think I should say. But anyway, it's great to be here and excited I'll pass it on to Erica. Great to have you, Erica.
Thanks, Joel. Hey, I'm Erica Telly from Seattle, and I'm a product evangelist at Record Point. I have to say I was most excited about the content services, the security, and the compliance announcements at Ignite, and I look forward to talking about that with y'all.
Great. Ryan, you're next.
I'm up. All right, Ryan Scouchen, Senior Systems Engineer with Office 365, also at Blizzard. I get to work with Joel. I'm also a Microsoft Certified Trainer and MVP in Office Apps and Services. Been working with SharePoint for quite a few years, attending quite a few Ignites. So this has been a good Ignite. So I'm looking forward to talking about what the cool things that we saw.
Great. So next one, Matt.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Matt Wade. I'm calling in today from upstate New York, so not the crazy city, but the beautiful countryside up by the Adirondacks. I'm the VP of Client Engagement with AtBot, and I am an Office Apps and Services MVP. I am not a developer, no coder kind of guy. Definitely adoption and collaboration, so I'm pretty excited about the SharePoint and Teams and bot stuff. And if you happen to know the periodic table of Office 365, that's me.
Good. Paul.
Hello, everybody. Martin, thank you for organizing this. I'm Paul Swider. I'm currently located in the North Shore of Boston and very excited to be participating today. I am the CEO and CTO of a healthcare and technology company, and I tend to focus a lot on code and data. I'll just leave it at that, code and data. Thank you.
All right. So my name is Maarten Visser. I'm a founder and product evangelist at Metro. We build solutions to help you search and have better navigation and content consumption experiences on the Office 365 and SharePoint platform. And today I will be trying not to share my opinion too much and just will try to lead our conversation and well, say crazy things so that you guys can react on it, and so that's the idea. For all the attendees, feel free to post questions if we hit a specific topic or discussion, and you feel like I want to know more about that. Feel free to put that in the questions bar of the GoToWebinar app, and if we have a good moment for it, we will pick it up and might respond to it. For now, I want to ask Joel to enlighten us on the approach that we will be taking during this webinar.
Thank you, Martin. You know, there were so many announcements at Ignite, and there's a ton of blog posts. In fact, every single session at Ignite was recorded and shared publicly, much more broadly than in the past even. So in a lot of ways, we could easily spend our time just going from feature to feature to feature to feature, and that's not what I think is the best here, because you can do that research online. How I want to do this is like, I want to get the emotions, I want to get the human, real world aspects to this. So I was chatting with Maarten about, let's get some like meaty questions, and the questions themselves will bring out the announcements, because all of us were there. We were in these sessions. We were sitting there when they announced these things. Some of us were clapping louder than others, and some of these things we got really excited about. And that's the part I want to hear, is like how we're implementing these with our customers or at the customers we work at. And it's those things. And I think what's great about this panel is each of us have different areas that we're focused on. And so anyway, that's kind of where we're coming from here for this Q&A.
Exactly. We really want to understand what you guys are passionate about. What made you feel better? What made you feel enthusiastic about new technologies that got announced? Anything. So we're looking here for emotions.
That's right. We want to hear what's real, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
And we're going to start off with the first question.
And I do think that this question is one that I want to hear from everybody. This is definitely one that, on the other ones, I think we can do like 2 or 3 ideas or hear from 2 or 3. But this one I do want to hear from every single panelist on this one.
So who wants to go first?
I'll start. This is Paul Swider. I'll start because I think I have a feeling my favorite might be a little different. So maybe I'll just get it out of the way early. But again, being a code and a data person, I was really excited about the SQL Server 2019 announcement. I had gotten so caught up in all of the announcements around the 365 offerings and the business apps that I actually had lost sight of the SQL Server stuff, and I didn't even realize that this announcement was coming. So it was a great surprise, and I still find that I spend a great deal of my time, looking at the underlying SQL Server and the underlying data and ETL. So it was really, I was just really excited about the SQL Server 2019 announcements and the inclusion of Spark and Hadoop. Thanks.
Yeah. So very quickly about SQL Server, because yes, it's a side topic, but I do understand it's much more than a relational database now. So you mentioned NoSQL, Spark. What?
Yeah, and the other key thing as well is, as much as more and more we're doing this stuff in the cloud, I think it's fair to acknowledge that there's still a lot of hybrid stuff, right? And in some cases, the on-prem. And so in those cases, certainly SQL Server is still core to what we're doing, right, in collab and content services. But yes, you're right. There's even NoSQL stuff as well that would be separate from content and collab services.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other favorite announcements?
Wait, let me just real quick. I'm really excited about SQL Server because I was supposed to be emotional.
Yeah, emotional.
I was
Good.
really excited when I heard this announcement. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this is Matt. I'll jump in on mine, and this one's kind of stupid, but you wanted passion. And like, I have been waiting for a real menu system in SharePoint since the day SharePoint 2007 rolled out for me. Menus and navigation have been like, I think, the Achilles heel, and we're finally getting mega menus. Now, I haven't looked at it completely fully yet. Like, it's probably not going to be exactly what I want, but it's way better than what we've had. And the site footers, the fact that you can now put see site owner X for information later on, like my first job with SharePoint, somebody had custom coded in the master page a little button to say, click here to see owners. I thought that was default in SharePoint until I left. And not having that when I went to my new job afterwards was the most infuriating thing ever, because if somebody has an issue, they need to go to the site owner and the site owner needs to be available. So being able to put something on the bottom that, my use case here is the site owner listing, but it could be anything. And that footer shows up in every page in every site, or every page in that site. I don't know. There were a lot of big announcements last week, but that was one that just like really tickled me, because it was like, oh, finally we get some real good usability improvements that I've been waiting for since more than a decade ago.
Absolutely. It's of course, these are relatively small announcements, but they have a big impact on user experience?
I'll go for a big macro announcement. So I was most excited actually about the Open Data Initiative that was announced between Adobe, SAP, and Microsoft. So the purpose of the announcement is that you'll be able to connect, understand, and use data. They're in all three of those systems, so you can create more meaningful AI experiences. But what I think it actually represents is a fundamental shift in thinking away from trying to get companies to migrate their data from one platform to the other, which is really low value, right? And putting more of a focus on how you get meaning and use from that data. So shifting from selling licenses to really going all in with that active usage. And I think that's just such an important shift in thinking for Microsoft and other large companies.
Yes, connecting those data silos. That's a very good thing. Joel, what was your favorite announcement?
I want to jump in. I want to say the one that blew me away, and I don't know how Microsoft kept this under wraps, but Microsoft Search. So what that means is this Microsoft Search is not just an upgrade to SharePoint Search. It's basically taking Search that is in Office 365 and SharePoint and your desktop and the browser and Bing and making it kind of this unified, consistent experience across all of them. And it's actually pushing it into Office. Like, that one blew me away. Like, I was super excited and surprised to see that search is going to be everywhere. And this focus on answers and focus on and like one of the super excited things about search is you can find people and you can find their location. Like, here's where my office is. Like, that was, for me, that was kind of a like, wow, how did they coordinate that across all the product teams in the Microsoft 365 world? And we're talking, like, there's this search slide where they talk about all the products where search is going to show up, and it was like a dozen products, and I don't think they're done. Like, it's going to change our world. I mean, search is already starting to show up in the SharePoint app now, but it's going to get so much better. They're investing so much in search that I think that every company needs to make search a project in 2019. Seriously.
I agree with that too, Joel. That's one of the things I thought was really kind of cool, but one of the things that Joel forgot to mention is, like, search is even coming to your Windows desktop. You can search Office 365 directly from your machine. You don't have to go out to Office 365 to go get it anymore. It's just pervasive. It goes everywhere. Beyond that, since he's kind of stole my thunder a bit, I would say one of the things that I know a lot of people have been asking for, that I've been personally looking for a lot, is they have announced the ability to do page designs inside SharePoint. So now I can actually say, hey, I want to create a template for what a page should look like, and I can get it in modern instead of with the old-fashioned page layouts kind of concepts. We can say, okay, here's the predefined layout of page, and we're off and running. So they kind of demoed a lot with the new news stuff they're doing, but you can also do a template or a page design for a news article, and you can have different variations depending on the content that's in there. So I think this is going to be one of those things that's going to allow people to start adopting the modern sites and modern UI a lot more quickly than what we have seen previously.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Yes, these page designs, do you see any specific use cases for like it's quicker to build something cool, or when you auto provision a site, or what can you imagine there that you will be using first?
I think we're going to get better adoption of news. Like, I think that news was a little bit squishy, where it's like, hey, create a news article and it can be pretty much anything. Now that we've got these layouts, you can actually have something that corporate communications can get excited about, rather than it just being free form every time you try and create a news article.
And bigger than that, it's scalable, right? So that if you have a couple people who are actually good at designing things, those people, the vast majority of people who are awful at designing things, can use those as a starting point. Because I think one of the biggest downsides sometimes to these enterprise apps is, the Microsoft will say, hey, we just gave you a great tool, and it's kind of like giving somebody a blank canvas, some paint, and a brush, and there's only a few Da Vinci's out there, right? So if you can provide a paint by number instead, that's a major win. You can get branding requirements met, you can keep things clean, and people aren't wasting their time trying to reinvent their own wheel at the local level.
Yeah, templating is good because it brings more consistency, which is also very good for a user experience perspective.
I think this gets a little bit more tricky now as well as Microsoft continues to introduce more SaaS components, right? So for example, now we also have Dynamics 365, which is getting pretty popular, and integrating that with the content services. So if we can have a way to effectively implement branding quickly across SaaS, right, whether it's Office 365 or Dynamics, and have that be consistent, I'm agreeing. I see that as a big win for all of us.
Absolutely. Any last things regarding favorite announcements, or we're going to move to the next one?
No, let's bounce.
Okay.
I like that. Let's bounce.
So what was the Ignite 2018 killer demo? What was the demo that like made your mouth fall open?
Ooh, I have one called Swider. I'll start again. I have to say this one. I really liked the blockchain demo during the keynote, and I liked it for several reasons. One is I'm not sure if people caught on just how complex that demo was. So I'm referring to the food chain. It was food supply chain, and it was the company Bueller out of Western Europe. I think they're out of Switzerland, but I don't want to be wrong about that. But essentially, what they did is they hooked up cognitive services, so high-speed cameras with cognitive services to look at the grain and determine if it was infested with the disease or not. And then they learned from that. They applied machine learning, right? So it's sort of the image recognition. Was I right? Was it disease or not? Okay, let's learn from this and move on next time. And then persisting that to the blockchain so that you have complete traceability of the food as well. So I love that demo. What I thought was interesting is the same day that Microsoft demoed this, IBM did their demo on lettuce and traceability in the food supply, but that's a whole nother conversation. But apparently it got a lot of attention. It got a lot of attention. Even IBM, apparently saw the demo. So that was mine. I just love that. Again, that was during the keynote. You can watch that now. It's recorded. It's up there on video for those that are interested. Thanks.
Cool. Who's next? Any other cool demos?
I'll go.
I'll tell you my favorite one was the Teams demo. So even though a couple of years ago we kind of got that introduction to Skype where you can have a conversation and then you can kind of read what the translation. The Teams demo that they did, super powerful. Like this idea of actually it seemed like it was really tight. You've got the people sitting around the table and having a meeting, and it doesn't matter what language the person is speaking. Everybody can actually understand what's going on, and that was like, I don't know, it was kind of mind blowing in terms of like what a company could do in these meetings and the technology they had in the room, like how it was all integrated into the screen, so they could be having this conversation. They don't all have to be in the room. You could have somebody remote, but somebody sitting in the room speaking Chinese and everybody understands what they're saying that was awesome. And I think it's a demo everybody should see too.
Sure. That was a good demo indeed.
All right.
Any other? Yep.
One of the things I thought, it wasn't necessarily a session demo, but it was more of kind of a demo that Microsoft put on. Was they in May that at the SharePoint conference, they announced SharePoint Spaces. So they actually had a huge section defined just for SharePoint Spaces in the kind of to the side of the expo hall a bit, but the demos that they had there were actually pretty impressive with the things you were able to do and the improvements they've made in the last few months. That this is looking like more and more of a viable solution and be able to come up with some viable business uses for mixed reality. So I was like, okay, this is some pretty cool stuff.
So Ryan, tell us some more about that. The skeptic in me says, I don't need AR to find my documents. This is not the Unix system that ran Jurassic Park. So what were some of the use cases for that? Because that's one where I'm like, why did they spend so much time developing an AR product or an AR side of a product that is just click and open?
That's a good question. So a lot of like initially when they first announced it, I was in the same boat. I'm like, okay, I'm not really seeing a business use case, but the more time I've had to stew over it since SPC, I've actually been able to see quite a few scenarios, and also with the company I work at, this is an extremely viable option. So the things they were demoing is they kind of have their standard canned demos. Okay, like you had a product catalog. Woohoo. They also did have an advanced demo that they were doing as well with actually data visualization. So one of the things they're actually putting in there is that you actually can interact and visualize with the data and see the different charts in different aspects, which kind of makes it a lot easier to consume in 3D data. One of the ones that the use cases I was looking at is just information sharing. Since I work at Blizzard, just thinking, okay, as a new hire, somebody coming in, we have a plethora of lore and story and artifacts and these things that somebody coming on needs to understand, whether you're at a video game company, whether you're at an architectural firm, what have you. There's a lot of information that people need to be able to consume, and they need to be able to see it in full fidelity. So being able to find routes to be able to share that information in an easily consumable fashion, so that way I can actually interact with it, see the different aspect ratios, and change things up and view it in ways that work best for me, that I can actually get a much more in-depth knowledge of things and get up to speed a lot quicker than it would be if I was just trying to read through a document.
Yep.
Yeah, this is
a lot.
The other
Sorry,
thing I'd
go
like
ahead.
to add is the significance of SharePoint Spaces in the broader VR world. So until SharePoint Spaces, you had to hire a very expensive Unity developer to build an immersive experience. But SharePoint has brought kind of that click and configure mentality to the VR space, which is not insignificant at all.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Erica. And I would add to that two things. Firstly, that when you look at the way SharePoint has made it easier to produce the VR, I also, as part of that discovery, learned at Ignite the underpinnings, right? So for example, they're using the Babel rendering engine beneath the scenes, and they have hooks tied into SPFX as well. What is also interesting is, from what I understand, there's a dual initiative going on with Dynamics as well, right? So what might happen is that this thing might, surface itself through SharePoint, but that same body of work would also surface itself through Dynamics. In terms of use cases, I really like the use cases around the HR and training and tours. I think that's stuff that's here today. I could see some of the younger generation being okay with using one of a handful of headsets to get their tour of a campus, or their tour of, again, as somebody said, architecture, right? If you're an architecture company, they could, in an hour, they would be able to get a tour of all the buildings you built around the world, the company. Right?
And while
So,
we're
yeah,
talking
I
about
agree. Go ahead. Yeah, thanks.
And while we're talking about it, I think that as well, you talked about training. I think that's huge. It's not like companies aren't going to roll out a headset to every employee on day one. It's going to be HR who might use it for new employee orientation and try and, it's like if you've got oil rigs and you're an oil company, being able to take somebody out to a distant remote oil rig and have them see the setup as a new employee, understand what you're working on. I think that's fantastic. It's the training and education of taking you places where you couldn't be otherwise. It's the people exploring the rocks in Mars. There's a number of reasons why you want to look at things in 3D, and the company may have the models, but the ability for accessibility for, say, a new employee or somebody who needs the training, that ability to go to the training center and spend some time in a headset, I think is for real. It may take a while, 2022 or so, maybe, and beyond, but the hardware is there, the capabilities of the technology is there. Now it's just about adoption, and I think it's really cool to see SharePoint leading the way in being able to bring these practical use cases for people who already have 3D and 360 content and videos and beyond, and creating these immersive digital experiences.
I'm excited. I'm keeping an open mind. I'm excited to see some case studies soon enough. The skeptic in me, though, sees this as like, remember when DVDs came out and they said, oh, every movies now you'll be able to have all these extra features, and you can watch scenes from different angles, and like the functionality is there. Whether or not anybody did it after the first like 5 DVDs that did it, or provided that, actually jumped on it is a different story, because it's extremely intensive and expensive to build these things. You have to be at an enterprise location, and you also have to have an appreciation for it. So like you guys at Blizzard, like that, you have an appreciation for that immersive environment, whereas XYZ insurance company with 10, 15,000 people probably wouldn't. But I am very excited to see where they go with it, especially because I want to know that dev time that went in Redmond was not spent on that, when it could have been spent on, I don't know, fixing up still some permissions issues that pop up in SharePoint once in a while on my end.
Here's another really great today use case, and then we can move on after this. But there was another big announcement made at Ignite this week that wasn't probably a big part of the world that we live in. But there was a big announcement made around IoT and digital twins, right? And so the idea is essentially that if I have a piece of hardware, a piece of machine, it can be anything, right? It could be a sailboat or a refrigerator or $1 million floor machine. Essentially what I can do is create a digital twin of that device. And that's really powerful for multiple reasons. I can do testing on IoT without impacting the $1 million machine, et cetera. I could see these two worlds merging. As a matter of fact, we're already seeing some demos of this where people put on the VR mask, and then all of a sudden they're seeing a digital twin of a $1 million machine, right? And they're able to see the documentation and interact and do some training type stuff. So I'll just throw that out there. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, Matt. I think you make some great points.
What's great about it is Microsoft is not just investing in one space. You've got the HoloLens team, and they're headed one direction. You've got this brand new announced, spun up at Ignite, the remote assist, and I think that one's extremely practical in the field. And then you've got this SharePoint Spaces thing where it's like, hey, you've got all this content, all these videos and images and content in your SharePoint space. Wouldn't it be great to be able to put those into this kind of immersive experience where it may not necessarily always be put on your headset, but being able to build those 3D experiences as a way of just creating a display and an experience. And I think they did announce that it's going to be available, for public preview in a year. So they're going to invest big. By the time it actually hits in a public way, it's going to be dialed in. So
the best thing about this technology is that the way I see it is Microsoft's really lowering the use cases. So it's very complex to set this up, and they're really building a platform for making it accessible to many more companies, also which won't have the millions to build such a platform. So I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
If you guys are okay with it, I'm gonna move to the next question.
Please.
So this is very quickly about, well, which session and why in like 15 seconds.
Search, boom, done.
What did you say?
Search, Microsoft Search.
Okay, good.
I love that one as well. Just be able the stuff they're showing off, the things we can do, and the integration was just mind blowing.
Jeff Teeper's 4 o'clock Monday session, which was shared by the entire SharePoint team, was in the room. In fact, when you look at Jeff's tweet, like his last tweet about Ignite, where he did his kind of big summary, all those people on the stage were SharePoint, family people from the product team that were there in that session. It blows my mind to think, Microsoft was so vested in that session to make sure that you could see all the announcements at a kind of a high level in that session. It really blew me away. It was fantastic. I'm actually going to make sure my CIO actually watches that session. It was packed, back to back to back.
Nice.
As a compliance person, I was super excited about the session called Harness Intelligence to Implement a Comprehensive Information Governance Strategy, because they showed how they're going to use AI and machine learning models to better classify data in quite a bit of detail. So I appreciated that.
Cool.
Yeah, there were a ton of investments in labels and in the compliance thing. It seems like they're making that much more accessible to users, and so it's not so hard, I think, as well.
And it makes it easier for organizations with the information protection. They're kind of centralizing instead of the different areas they had it before. It's all consolidated. You can actually protect documents from leaving your organization built into Windows. I thought that was kind of amazing.
Yeah, so you're referring to the announcement around the unified labels where they've merged together Azure or Microsoft information protection labels with that advanced data governance labels in Office 365. So one label to rule them all.
Finally, because that was really confusing beforehand, trying to explain to
Sure.
clients that there's two different options and they provide different features.
Especially with something so important like DLP or information management. Just real quick, my favorite session, I have to call this out, was Mark Rusinovic did a session on day 4. So Mark Rusinovic is the CTO of Azure. He's best known as, it's actually sort of funny, there's a running joke. People still call him the sysinternals guy because he was the one that actually wrote sysinternals for Windows Server. And so the joke is now is sometimes he'll even be introduced that way, although he is the chief technology officer now of Azure. The session was basically a deep dive into Azure data centers. So he actually, what was so cool about this session, and it's recorded, you can watch it now on demand, anybody that's listening to this, what he did is he actually walked you through the entire process of how they designed their data centers, and he went through the history. Like he basically started with and admitted, you know, hey, in the early days of Azure, we were basically just standing up servers for people, you know, and this is where we are today with containers and Docker. And the most important, impressive thing, I know, I'll be really quick here, they're actually doing some data centers under the ocean now. So they sent one server down in 30 feet of water for 1 year, and the test went well. So now they've got a whole rack of servers down. You can watch this. There's a camera on this rack of servers. It's 1 kilometer deep in the ocean right now. So the idea is if you take all of the environment out, the human environment, the weather environment, etc., these servers will run a lot longer and a lot better. Amazing session. I would really encourage people to check it out online. Thanks.
Good. Moving to the next question. What was your favorite SharePoint announcement? So, what did we like most? One
I'll jump
specific
in.
thing, can be very small.
The integration with Teams. So I use Teams every day. Internally, we are on Teams 100%. I hate email, and I don't have to use it as much as I used to any longer. And the fact that you can now bring, you know, you can teamify a SharePoint site, which admittedly, I mean, the whole concept of Office 365 groups can be really confusing depending on which entry point you take. But the fact that I can now add a team to a SharePoint site that is already part of an Outlook group is really, really handy. And then bringing in SharePoint pages, SharePoint libraries, like full fidelity ones, and SharePoint lists into Teams as tabs is a big win because the Teams team advertises itself as the hub of collaboration and that you never have to leave the UI. And that was not necessarily true before. And it is becoming more so now because if you can have like your homepage or your team landing page and whatnot automatically available in a tab for each of your teams, that's a huge win.
So Matt, if I understand correctly, your favorite SharePoint announcement is actually the tool which takes away people from using actually SharePoint, but
I mean,
Teams.
so one of the best things about Teams is introducing people to SharePoint without letting them know it's SharePoint. It's kind of like putting your dog's medicine into a block of cheese or something, because a lot of people will say I hate SharePoint when in fact they just think they hate SharePoint. So getting all those SharePoint goodness within another environment that you don't have to leave, I think is a huge win, even if the SharePoint team may not like to admit it.
That's a much more positive way of looking at it. I think you're right.
It was positive, no, either way.
Yeah. Teams is a great UI, and it's absolutely correct. You know, when you're collaborating on files, it is nice to it's SharePoint behind the scenes. It's kind of cool.
So my favorite announcement.
Go ahead, Erica. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say my favorite announcement was actually for the people who have invested a lot in SharePoint. So up until the SharePoint Online days or modern SharePoint days, a lot of our information architecture investments were in content types and managed metadata. And it was kind of left behind for a while. You didn't see a lot of integrations between kind of the new modern world and those investments. But there was 2 really big things they announced at Ignite this year. So first of all, they've made updates to the taxonomy APIs. So you can now develop solutions that create and consume the content types and the managed metadata in other solutions. And then the ability to apply those labels that we were talking about earlier, using the content types and metadata, because a lot of people, if they made records management investments in SharePoint previously, they used content types and metadata. So now we're able to bridge those worlds together.
Wow, that's awesome. I just a quick shout out to my SharePoint announcement. A shout out to the SPFX team. I think they've been doing some really great work, and they announced, I think it's the newest version. If I might be wrong on the version number, I think it's 1.7. And it was just really great to see what the PMP group and what that community and the team is doing with SharePoint development. In my opinion, SharePoint development, it truly is the best it's ever been. The state of SharePoint development, in my opinion. Thank you.
Absolutely. The version that was released was 1.6 at the end of September, which has a lot of great enterprise features and integration with Microsoft Graph, stuff like that. And before the end of the year, we're going to get 1.7, which has a load of other cool things that we've been waiting for. But totally agree.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I never thought, I didn't think I would hear myself say this, but I wish I had a reason to write some code in SharePoint right now, but I just don't right now. But boy, does it look, I mean, it's just really impressive the work they're doing. Thanks.
Okay. Any other favorite SharePoint announcements? Otherwise, we're moving to OneDrive.
The machine learning integration, I think, is definitely worth calling out as well. There's the being able to push stuff into Flow and then get the rich. There's a ton of like rich list columns and stuff that you can then bring in based on your integration with Flow and pushing stuff through machine learning. I think this is what it does is it makes those old dusty libraries into something that you can kind of figure out what's actually relevant. And when you push a ton of data into a list, you want to figure out what's the positive sentiment, what's the negative sentiment. Let me figure out what are the things we need to respond to, or you know, it starts getting limitless when you start saying, I want to push this data through this flow and I want it to analyze it and then come back and tell me information about it. I think that's really super powerful. Even though search is probably more of a favorite.
Bringing cognitive services to SharePoint lists and other integrations through Flow. Yes, good stuff. So OneDrive, what did we see?
OneDrive on demand for Mac for the win.
Yes, OneDrive on the Mac.
Also,
I think that was the biggest one.
The Office Lens integration, I think, is huge, and I'm just waiting for Office Lens to be retired because at this point, OneDrive offers so many of the features of Lens that it might as well just be called OneDrive and Lens.
We do see more integration in the mobile apps, right? Like, what are you doing in the SharePoint app? What you're doing in OneDrive?
The SharePoint app has taken huge leaps and bounds as well. Like it started to get kind of irrelevant, but I think this latest release and where they're going with it makes it so much more relevant.
Yeah, I feel like I was always jumping out of SharePoint whenever I was using it.
Yep.
Indeed. Any other SharePoint OneDrive announcements?
So speaking of kind of that angle of Lens, I really do like the content extraction as well. Like you're uploading your business images and it's actually extracting relevant content out of it so that and potentially even pushing it into the list itself. You know, basically making it much more searchable. So it actually enhances your content in OneDrive for business too.
That is really powerful. The one thing, having done a lot of search like troubleshooting and optimization in the past, the one thing I get a little scared of with all this AI stuff and machine learning is our search indexers are going to get so overwhelmed with content that when you search for like finance or expense reporting, that anytime that word comes up or that phrase comes up in anything, the more it exists, the harder it is to find the right one. So if you have only 5 things that are tagged as, you know, expense reporting, because a human tagged it, that means that you're only going to have a range of those 5 items. But if ML is automatically tagging things and you have 10,000 things now tagged as that, I'm not entirely sure. Like I understand the value of pulling that out, but then when you get into the search realm of things, search a lot of times in many organizations is bad because there's so much content that is sitting in an index that's been around and not deleted for so long. And you can say like, well, yeah, so have a, an expiration policy on files and whatnot, but real life, a lot of places don't do that and don't care to do that, or they
That's
can't.
why graph being part of everywhere, it knows you, it knows it's adding so much more relevancy. That's I'm not worried about it adding the additional tags. I'm because of the relevancy is getting so much better as well because of the contextual and the ability to put in answers. Like if you say these policies are the answer for the company, they can just come up as answers in search. Like that's great too. I mean that was one of the announcements as well.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's going to be very interesting to see how Microsoft Search and bringing in the power of the graph and the power from Bing as having a better understanding of topics and entities and the doing extraction on that, how it will help us find the right data. It's going to be very interesting to see how that will work.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the great one too, is like you add something as a bookmark and you're trying to think of what all the synonyms are, it'll actually use machine learning as well to actually recommend, it'll try and figure out what are the various ways that bookmark, enterprise bookmark, should be used and exposed. So it gets smarter as well.
I would like to see Microsoft start releasing where they're at with machine learning, right? So what would be nice is to see what is the probability level that they're at when they're predicting this stuff. And for some reason, they're not sharing that with us yet, right? One of the things that worries me a little bit is going back to the Mark Racinovic demo is, so he had a camera on their rack of servers a mile under the ocean, and they employed machine learning as well to try to determine if a fish was a fish or not. So that's pretty basic ML. Like, are you a fish? Like we're in the middle of the ocean. There's a little thing swimming around. What's the probability of it being a fish? If you go to that camera right now, they're down at the 70s and low 80s. Like that's not decision making. You'd be better off not guessing at that point, right? Especially when you're talking about finding answers and finding the right data. I mean, what's worse than not finding data is finding the wrong data and thinking you're right? That's even more scary. So I want to see Microsoft start producing some of the probability percentiles that they're at with this stuff, and then I think we'll have a better conversation.
It's getting better, Paul. It is.
Of course. Well, that's why they call it machine learning. I mean, I hope they're not going in the opposite direction. But here's an example. Other companies like Tesla have blown this out of the water, right? We could go on and on about this. I'll stop here, but no, yeah, it's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah. So Paul already mentioned blockchain and SQL Server. So Erica, what was your favorite announcement outside of the SharePoint space? Did you have a specific thing which caught your attention?
I mean, I kind of already touched on it. It was definitely the machine learning around applying classification labels for purposes of compliance and retention. And then the unified labels. The other thing that is significant about the unified labels is there's this product that you may or may not have heard of called Cloud App Security, where you're now able to kind of listen in on your firewall and your logs to see what apps outside of Office 365 and Microsoft people are using. So things like G Suite or Box or Dropbox. And what they're kind of getting into now is the ability to apply DLP policies to data that lives not in Office 365 at all. And how they're doing that is through the AIP label. So that's so cool.
Yes, that sounds very, very useful from a security perspective. Yes. So Joel, what was your favorite non-SharePoint announcement where you would think that will have a lot of impact?
I'm probably going to defer a little bit to Paul's announcement around SharePoint SQL. It's like it kind of blew my mind all the investments they're putting into SQL. And when you think about SQL as the back end of SharePoint, and like from an on-prem perspective, but also when you think about how things will evolve when our repository is expanding and going in so many different crazy directions. Like forget about structured data now. Like it went in so many different wild directions in my mind that it's like the way we think about data, we need to rethink. We need to like step back from the file, man, because it's so much more now. And how we want to look at data, I think, has been turned on its head. It's huge. The way that we look at a SQL database will never be the same. That blows my mind.
True. Any other cool announcements outside of the SharePoint space?
So I live in the bot world, and I will say that Bot Services SDK 4.0 went GA on Monday, which made for a very interesting demo because I was actually demoing on Monday, building a bot in 10 minutes. But the fact that they have new templates, better interface, and they have a nice new bot emulator for testing, so you can do either local or cloud testing. Kind of a minor thing probably for most people, but for me, the upgrade to Q&A Maker now includes, Q&A Maker is basically the ask 5 different ways to say the same question, and here's one vetted answer, and the bot can basically connect to that. Provides this thing called chit chat. Now, kind of like SharePoint, where you can set up SharePoint and it's great, and that's not really the hard part, although there's probably a lot of IT pros right now steaming as I say that. The really hard part is making sure that the content in SharePoint is good and that it's organized and all that. Well, Q&A Maker is very similar, so you have to provide, a virtual door knock. So if I say, what are you, or is this a bot, or how are you today, or just that general conversational stuff, you have to write that from scratch. And that's really difficult to come up with the right phrasing and all that kind of stuff. So they actually now have 3 different chit chat personas. Basically, the professional keeps it very, professional. The friend, which is a little bit more informal, and the comic, which will make jokes or, use phrasing that's a little bit more, I guess, funny. I wouldn't go that far, but they coined it that. But the fact that I can just turn that on with my actual content in Q&A Maker is really handy, because it means that I don't have to go out and now spend 2 more hours or 10 more hours or 15 hours just authoring general, white noise of human interaction. And then the kind of last big announcement they had was Cortana Skills for Enterprise, and that's effectively bringing, call it, AKA Cortana for Business. So that means that you can take that bot that you have in the background and you can integrate it and talk directly to your Windows 10 machine right now. Eventually, they'll be bringing Cortana to other experiences, I think. So like those are some really big enhancements to the whole bot framework, bot services, all that stuff, which I think is a small community of people doing it, but I think it's going, because, Satya keeps saying that conversational UI is the next UI, and I think he's right. So the fact that those things are available to us and sort of now built as templates is really, really handy.
Yeah, I really like the Alexa Cortana integration now too.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, and what I understand is that the Q&A Maker and searching from Bing and Microsoft Search, all these things are going to get connected. You're gonna, if you're asked something to Bing.com or Office.com, it will also run like these frequently asked questions in the back and stuff. I think that's all coming together at one point.
Yeah, the biggest win for Q&A Maker will be when it finally gets ML, because right now that's always the biggest question, or maybe even complaint from my clients is, how do I make it know what the answers are based on input that I provide it versus writing vetted, correct, human provided answers, and that day will be a major day. So if they can do some integration with search, that would be pretty slick.
Cool. So we're gonna do a quick couple of use cases or products here where we very quickly want to have the best thing. And the first one is Yammer. And of course, well, Yammer is always going up and down, and I've heard a lot of jokes, but what's happening to Yammer? Who is capable of phrasing like in 30 seconds what's happening there? Who dares to?
I mean, the only thing I noticed is that they're finally getting rid of storing documents in Yammer, and SharePoint will be the one place to store documents. And I think it still is quite siloed from the other Office 365 products, but at least they're trying to make some strides in having the Yammer web part for modern pages and such.
So I went to the Yammer session, and they said there's more people working on Yammer right now than ever before. And they promised us that Yammer is going to be it's going to be a proper citizen with all of the rest of the Office 365 stuff. And while it seemed like the coolest thing that they announced was this Yammer web part, which is I'd give it a B. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect. But it's something that's new, and it will help integrate Yammer with the rest of what's going on. But I think that we haven't seen yet the best of Yammer. I think that Yammer is there. You know, when you talk to the Yammer team, they're like, you wouldn't believe how fast this thing is growing, and how many people are still using this. And I think that Microsoft behind the scenes is now getting quite serious about Yammer. And happy birthday, 10-year Yammer. That was one of the parties there at Ignite.
Joe, let me ask you this, because Microsoft's biggest client is government services, right, and citizen services around the world. Do you think that realistically they're just hanging on to Yammer for those existing clients that already bought into it?
No. No, I do think that Yammer has a purpose, and we're figuring out more of what that purpose is as Teams ate its lunch in the team space.
Okay.
I think that Yammer is going to continue to be more of this enterprise engagement level, and it's also going to, you know, I think it'll still exist as kind of that conversation inside of a site, but I don't think there's anything about we're keeping Yammer because people are using it. I think it is there are significant investments, and I think we'll see those in the spring. If you're asking
so it's not the BlackBerry syndrome where the U.S. governments and governments abroad are hanging on to it. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's still a lot
I'm
of
excited
good
to
space.
see how Yammer finally becomes a first-class group citizen. I think Paul, it's a fair question. A lot of people poo-poo Yammer, but there is a definite use case, and anybody that says to me that Teams takes over for Yammer does not understand the use case separation between the two, and I'm happy to sit them down for 10 minutes to give them an example overview of why they're different. The only thing that I have to, for anybody listening that happens to run Yammer and Teams at the same time, there's a Teams or a Teams tab for Yammer coming out soon, and there's going to be a lot of confusion there because a Yammer group and a Teams group cannot interact yet. You can add a team to an Outlook group, and you can add an Outlook group to a team, but if you pick Yammer, you're stuck with Yammer. So if you're bringing a Yammer feed into a team, do not expect that those files are going to be living in the same site in the background, because that's very, very, very confusing architecture-wise, because these things currently are like oil and water. I'm sure eventually they will get to be closer, which is what I mean by that first-class citizen part. So if you're going to be playing with both, beware.
They are going to fix the files thing. That was pretty clear.
No, I know that, but the group. Yeah, but hold on. So what I'm saying is that the Yammer group has its own site, and if you're bringing a Yammer feed into the Teams tab, the team has its own site too. So while you're looking at the communication in the same UI, the sites are two different things.
Yeah, you're right. You're right there.
I want to summarize this with saying that it's moving into further and further integration with the rest of the Office 365 platform, and that's, I guess, and they're working on it, and I totally agree that there are some very strong use cases for Yammer, especially in larger organizations. Yes. Okay. Due to time restraints, of course, we have about 6 minutes, and there are a couple of items that I quickly want to touch base on, especially this one, which is very close to my heart. I started as an Outlook form developer doing workflows based on Outlook forms, and later on I did InfoPath, and of course I did a lot of things with workflow and forms, and this Microsoft Power Platform is really growing to something which is becoming very, very powerful and has a lot of use cases. So what announcement related to Power Apps or Flow or Power BI would you quickly want to mention as something interesting here? Who has seen some of the demos or?
Yeah, so I'm very, business apps are a big part of my life, across Dynamics and Power Platform, and to some extent Office and content services as well. I think the key thing that I picked up on, it was more a private announcement, but it's not under NDA, so I can share it with people here. Essentially, going into Ignite, I had this premise where if I was going to use Power Apps to build business apps, I would want my line of business and my core business apps to be in Dynamics. And my thought was I would want my content and my collab and my intranet apps to be in 365, right? And so what's interesting is I talked to Richard Riley, so he's taking a big charge on this Power Platform stuff. And what he explained to me is that he has his vision where he would like people to start to view Power Platform as a standalone thing, right? That of course we could tie it into Dynamics and do business apps, and we could tie it into collab services and do intranet apps. But from his perspective, there's no reason why this thing couldn't stand by itself. For that matter, maybe even talk to Salesforce, for example, as well as consume some services in Azure and in Office 365, et cetera. So I think the plan here is they push this forward, as a standalone thing. There's even some talk about doing some Power Platform Saturdays, if anybody's interested in that. And I think the goal here is to just keep getting folks in the SharePoint and the Dynamics community engaged with business apps in the Power Platform. So while that was not a public announcement, it's certainly something I would like to share with people around the Power Platform. Thank you.
Okay.
One cool
Any
thing in
other-
Flow, yeah, I guess technically it wasn't an Ignite announcement, but they put a video out maybe a month beforehand, and this is a really high value new trigger they're gonna come out with. It is a location-based trigger, so you basically put a square in a GPS space and say if this person or if I have my phone on me and I walk into it, that will kick off, that can be considered a trigger that will kick off any flow that I have, which I think is really cool. You have a lot of use cases there for when somebody arrives to work or is moving around, or even if you have deliveries happening, right, that kind of thing, that would be pretty slick.
Yeah, cool. I didn't know that. I missed that. Cool. Well, quickly, I had some slides regarding specific the core use cases of SharePoint, but we already touched most of it, I guess. So this was about the SharePoint intranet. We talked about the mega menu, which was big. If we very quickly have to name one or two features, like a web part or something that you saw, what would it be? Like 10 seconds. Hub updates, maybe. We touched on the layouts and the footers.
One thing that's kind of interesting about SharePoint, what they did though, since nobody else is chiming up, was the news hub as well. So that you can actually define a source for your news for your organization. And they said they're going to be coming with more to be able to do more than just one, but the ability to say, okay, all of the news from my organization, if it comes from here, this is a higher relevance. So show this to people more frequently, so people know, okay, this is the actual news location.
Yeah, good. Very quickly, another thing about SharePoint collaboration, we mentioned the Teams integration. When we look at the workload of collaboration, we touched governance, labels. I think we touched everything here, or is there one thing that we missed? Nope. Okay, maybe personalized web parts, or that might also be an internet thing, but yeah. Let me go to content services then. Erica already mentioned, well, the unified labels. I saw that when you create a new site, you're gonna get these, you can have this sensitivity where if you create a site, you get asked about the different levels that you might have. Anything else you want to quickly mention, Erica, regarding content services?
I mean, they announced this at SPC, but they're modernizing document sets, so those aren't going away. That's an important information architecture tool. And then, yeah, they're just continuing to invest in label analytics. You can see how your labels have been applied and who's doing what. But I think that about covers it. Yeah,
I saw the file card, maybe, which is a nice thing, which very quickly tells you things about a file, how many text it is, and some other specifics. I like that. Okay, anybody else? A quick one before we move to the next slide, the next question. Okay, well, we have a couple of minutes left. I'm thinking about what to do. Well, I still see a lot of people.
Why don't you jump to the outside question? Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of questions that people would have is why go to Ignite, and like And I think because people would say, oh, well, all the content you could ever want is online. Why would you ever go to Ignite? And I think that what I want to make sure is addressed is it's about the relationships. It's about the network. It's about the community. It's about being able to have conversations. It's about the dedicated time you'll have to then be able to really dive into this stuff and walk away. Like there's a lot of people that I'm seeing now that are like, oh, I got the 2 or 3 sessions I needed, I'm good to go, where what you're missing out on, and I think that people have this kind of this idea that everything they need is in these sessions, and that's I want people to understand that's not all absolutely the case, you know.
Oh yeah, I have to echo that. My dirty little secret is I think I went to maybe 3 or 4 sessions over the course of a whole week, right? And one of them was mine, right? So it definitely comes down to talking to people, getting access to the product group, going up to seeing the demos, use cases, and just, you know, getting excited with people, commiserating with people, going to these events, that kind of thing. And especially now that some people may not realize this, but the Microsoft Tech Summits from last year, which were basically the roadshow for Ignite, have been renamed Ignite the Tour. And there's a concern out there right now that a lot of managers who would be paying for somebody to go to Ignite will say, well, I don't need to send you to Ignite because we now have Ignite the Roadshow. So like, why would I ever send you there? That marketing is good, but don't let that, you know, that person that would be paying for you to go try to pull that card, because it really comes down to you have no other good opportunity. You know, LinkedIn and Twitter and even chat or, you know, whatever is not going to be a replacement for in-person conversation with a lot of the people that you run into, and you're going to see this is the world-class event. So I would have to echo everything that Joel said on that one for various reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to add it in support to that, it's especially important, I think, today than it has been in the past, because so many of these technologies are converging. Like the theme throughout this presentation has been you can use Teams together with SharePoint and Flow and business apps, and that means that, you know, we can't all know everything. We have to know people that are experts in each one of those areas just to do our everyday jobs. So that networking is so essential to the productivity of your organization. Send your people to Ignite.
Yep. So this question was broadly about what was your best moment outside of the conference floor, basically. Would one of you have a quick anecdote or something that might have happened after 6 p.m. and that is there something you want to share? And we're gonna leave it at this question, I guess, and then I'm very curious if somebody wants to share something about.
Yeah. Well, so I organized SharePoint on Sunday evening along with David Levier of SharePoint Party Patrol, SBC Party Patrol, in Nintex. And we thought it was so important for there to be a gathering place on Sunday night for people from all of these related technologies to get together and meet each other offline, because we know each other online. And it turned out to be extremely successful, and we had, I think, the bar at capacity during points of the evening.
Nice.
Yeah, A+ on that, Erica. That was an excellent event, because otherwise, what were people going to be doing on Sunday when they arrived before the Monday? My other thing. So with the periodic table that I built, I have about 12 or 13 translators who have done, you know, actual human translation of the graphic itself. And I think I met like a third or half of the people who, these are just random people that I put an APB out and said, who can help me with some translation services? And being able to like buy them a drink and say, hey, thank you so much for everything that you've done. This has been really great. And, you know, they get some visibility out of it too. But these are just avatars online to me, and like people that are recipients of emails that I've never met before. So this being my second Ignite and the first since we've launched a bunch of those translations, it was just really cool to finally see in person and talk and converse and share stories and that kind of thing, which is really, really cool.
And maybe I can build on that, Matt, because I think one of the special moments I had was watching a couple of the newer MVPs and newer community people come into the conference, and they were telling stories similar to yours. And for me, that was really, I had mixed emotions. It was just, in some sense, it was overwhelming. It was wonderful to see, because I remember when I first was introduced to the community, you know, gosh, a long, long time ago, but I remember that first conference. I remember the first time I met people in person. that were nothing more than avatars to me. And I think over the years, maybe it's easy to lose sight of that for some of us that have been in the community for some time. For me, it was really refreshing to see, again, this newer group of folks coming up and to see them be so excited to meet people in the community for the first time. It was really amazing. And maybe that would also be an answer to why you should consider attending Ignite in person. Thank you.
You know,
All right.
I spent Saturday, I got there a little bit early and met up with a SharePoint person that I hadn't seen in probably 13, 14 years. A SharePoint person. Just kind of a, hey, I'm going to go to Disney or Universal, and I was able to spend the whole day with like this SharePoint fan. Like his license plate says SharePoint on it. That's how much he loves SharePoint.
Cool.
And we did Hogwarts together. We had a blast. And the attendee party, as I understand it, was really cool at Universal. But I also saw people
I'm a Disney guy, and
skydiving.
even I like Universal.
Wow. Yeah. But it's like there were so many things going on. You could go from party to party to party. Like if you didn't have 3 every night, you weren't trying.
Yep.
It was
There were
pretty fun.
a lot of possibilities to have cool conversations about technology and use cases and business while enjoying a beer or a drink. I guess.
And I think what people don't also realize is like I just happened to be walking through the lobby and Jeff Teeper's getting ready to go jogging, and so it's those casual conversations you get to have where you can actually give feedback to your favorite Microsoft connections, and where you don't really get that elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was amazing. I think I told you at the event, I actually bumped into Mark Vasinovic 2 other times in the same day, like right in the hotel store and just coming out of the elevator. Like that would, without that at conference, that would never happen. Those random bump-ins, right?
Nah, Paul's just a fanboy, I think.
I am.
He's a groupie. We all know it.
Yeah.
I am a geek. I am a fanboy. Yes.
Yeah, but you're so right. The spontaneous interaction with specific Microsoft engineers or VPs. I came across Scott Guthrie last year, and he was just waiting for someone, and I had the ability to have a couple of minutes cool talk, and yeah, that's the only place where these kind of conversations might happen, which is great. So since we are over time, we can do 2 things. We can just end the webinar here and stop it, or we can do one more question. What does the panel say? We still have about 100 people in the session. We could do one more. What do you think?
Well, how about we give our salutations and say personally, I'm just gonna say I gotta run, but I'll see you at SBC. I think that's the thing to say is where we might see you next, either in Slovenia or at Redmond SharePoint Saturday or San Diego
European SharePoint Conference.
SharePoint Saturday, European. Yeah, exactly. There's definitely connect with us and see. I'll see you soon.
Yes. Next one is European SharePoint Conference, Copenhagen, next month. That's it. But Joe, you have to go. So I think the wise thing here is just to end the webinar and keep it close to an hour. We had a great discussion. I want to thank all the panelists here for joining. Good stuff. I think we were capable of touching most of the most important topics here. For all the attendees, thank you for joining this webinar. I hope you learned a bit, and based on what we discussed, you can maybe dig deeper in specific webcasts or specific recordings of the sessions. I see most of the PowerPoint decks are also now on the MyIgnite site, which is great. So I'm saying well, goodbye. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you guys for joining, and thanks. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Ciao.